2 years ago today, I was living in London, where I was witnessing a decline in a society like I had never seen before. People around me were down and pessimistic, and I could sense from everyone that no one really had any hope for a brighter future. To make matters worse, the crime where I was living had become almost untenable. There was increasing political tension, and the weather, of course, sucked like it always had. And all the while, as my business was taking off, I started to realize that around 45% of my income was going to be going to a government that I no longer felt like was giving me anything back. That is why I made the decision to leave the UK permanently and move to Dubai. And so far, it has been the best decision of my life. Here in Dubai, I'm surrounded by positivity and hope. The sun is shining every single day. I get to enjoy amazing activities around me while feeling safe every single day and paying a whopping 0% of my income to the government. And it's not just me. Last year, the UK had the second highest net number of millionaires leaving the country, whereas the UAE had the net highest in the entire world of millionaires coming into the country. So this is a clear trend. The UK is going down while Dubai is thriving. So if you're in the UK right now and you're interested in making the same move, as in you don't feel like the UK is giving you a lot of value for you, then in this video I'm going to give you a full step-by-step guide on exactly all the steps that you will need to go through to make this move yourself, and it can be done in as little as 2 weeks, believe it or not. First of all, why make this move specifically? Well, we covered already why the UK is not such a great place anymore. If you're a high earner or an entrepreneur, sure, if you're broke, if you're not making much money, it can still work for you, but presumably if you're watching this video, you're not that kind of person, or you at least have the ambition to not be this kind of person. Now, I know many people, when you hear Dubai, let's say you haven't been here, you haven't really researched it properly, you're gonna have a lot of fears like, oh, Dubai, like it's like a weird place in the Middle East, like why would you go there? And let me tell you, there's a lot of misconceptions that people have that are based on information from like 10-15 years ago about Dubai. And what I just challenge you to do is actually practically research the place, come visit the place, go see what the reality is on the ground. Because let me tell you, if you're just listening to the legacy media and the ideas that people have about Dubai, most likely 90% of that is going to be completely inaccurate. So let me give you some practical benefits of living in Dubai over the UK as someone who has actually been here. First of all, obviously we have the taxes. I'll cover how all of that works in a second, but basically for most people you can get 0% personal tax and 0% corporate tax. We have obviously amazing weather, and let me tell you, it is such an underrated benefit of seeing the sunshine every single day. Like, it's been proven that it affects our mood positively in so many different ways. We have high levels of public safety. Here, laws and punishments are actually taken seriously. If you commit crimes, you are going to be punished for it, which leads to a very safe environment for everyone else. Things just work. In the UK, public services, especially the NHS, is all a complete train wreck. It's all going down. I think everyone knows this by now. Here in the UAE, it's completely the opposite. And there's many other benefits, but I think the biggest one is that this place is actually going up. Like, if you live in the UK, you're now pretty much almost used to the fact that things are just sort of declining over time. You can probably assume that things 5 years from now are going to be worse than they were now, because things now are much worse than they were 5 years ago. And it's so refreshing to be in a place where it's actually the opposite of this. Whatever problems the UAE has now, which, by the way, like, it's still obviously not perfect, no place is perfect, you can be sure that within 5-10 years, these problems are going to be fixed. And a lot of the time, much sooner than that. Now, before we get into the actual process, if you're not using an expert to help you, then I recommend you do a lot of research on this. It's a pretty simple process if you do it right. Like, you need to sort of do every single step correctly. If you don't do this right, you might find yourself still having to actually pay tax in the UK because you didn't exit the country properly. You might end up with a business structure that is completely wrong. If you are looking for help from experts on guiding you through this entire process, essentially just doing all of this for you, then I can hook you up with my partners down below, where you can get on a free call with us. They can explain everything to you. You can ask any questions you might have for your specific situation, and they can help you. And then if you move forward with the process, they will essentially just handhold you and do all of this for you, so you don't have to worry about any of this. And this is exactly how people like Dan or Kalen, for example, you can see the testimonials on the screen, made this exact same move. And I encourage you to look at more of the reviews down below in the description. And whatever agent you go with, make sure to read the reviews. There's a lot of very bad agents in Dubai, which is why we've got into this business ourselves, because we know that we're doing this properly. Always read the worst reviews that you can possibly find to make sure you don't get scammed, because a lot of people have been scammed in this industry, and I don't want that to be you. Now, before we even start the process of actually setting you up in the UAE, you need to actually exit the UK properly. Contrary to what many people think, you can't just leave the UK and now you can just go to the UAE and pay no tax. Roughly the process that you want to do this is that first you want to become a non-UK resident. What does it mean? Well, UK has what are called statutory residence tests, and you can look at these on the government website. That is specific conditions based on which you are going to be what is called tax resident in the UK. For example, if you spend more than 6 months in the country, in many cases even much less than that, then you are essentially liable for taxes to the UK on all of your income. So you want to look at these conditions and make sure that you don't meet any of the conditions to be considered UK tax resident. In practice, to oversimplify this, if you spend less than 3 months a year in the UK, you're almost certainly fine. In most cases, if it's less than 4 months, you're still going to be fine, but this sort of depends on your exact situation, what ties you have to the UK, things like this. You want to be very careful about how many days you spend in the UK, because it's not enough to actually just set up in the UAE. Even if you have a tax residence in the UAE, if you also trigger tax residence in the UK is still going to tax you on all of your income. So this is super, super important. If you don't do this right, none of the rest of the stuff matters. And the other thing that is very important here is what is called the 5-year rule. So let's say you exit UK, you sell your assets, you sell your crypto or whatever, but then you return to the UK within 5 years. This is going to trigger this 5-year rule, where basically the UK is going to retroactively tax all your capital gains that you gained while you were out of the UK. And something many people often ask me is that, what if you live in the middle of the tax year? Do you need to still pay tax for the rest of the tax year? As you know, in the UK, the tax year for some reason runs from April to April. Well, no. If you leave in the middle of the tax year, you have what is called split year treatment, meaning that you will essentially just apply for it. If you work with a professional, they'll make sure you handle all this correctly, where you essentially become a non-resident on the day when you leave, even if this is in the middle of the tax year. So if you're leaving in the middle of the tax year, you just want to make sure you apply for this properly. Another thing to consider is that the UK does actually have what is called an exit charge when you're leaving the UK with a company or with a lot of assets. Now, in most cases, and everyone that I know that has exited the UK has been able to claim that the value of the business is actually zero. If it is a kind of business where, let's say, you run a YouTube channel or something like that, where the business essentially could not run without you, in that case, you can often claim that the value of your business without you is zero. So essentially, you don't need to pay any tax on the value of your business when you're leaving the UK tax system. But again, this is something that's going to be case by case. This is not tax advice. Don't listen to me. Work with a professional. They're going to help you do this properly. But you're going to have to essentially declare to the government that you're exiting. You're going to have to file everything properly and things like this. Otherwise, you might have to pay an extra charge, and in some cases, you might have to pay this. In terms of what to do with your UK companies when you're exiting the UK, in most cases, the optimal way to do this is that you become a non-resident yourself first before you sell any companies or anything like that. And then after that, you essentially pay all the retained earnings from your company to yourself as dividends, which, because you're now a UAE resident, assuming obviously you did everything properly, this will be taxed at 0%. And then you close down your UK businesses and open up, well, at this point, you would have already opened up a UAE company, which we'll cover in a second. And assuming you can do the thing properly with the exit tax, where you don't have to pay any exit tax with your company when you're leaving, this can allow you to exit all the funds from your existing UK company at 0% tax. And this is better than first dissolving your company while you're still a UK resident, because then you would have to pay UK personal tax on all of those gains. But again, case by case basis, work with a professional to come up with the optimal plan for you. This is just what we found works for most people. Now that we've dealt with the UK, let's now go into the process of what it actually looks like to move to the UAE and set up a company there. Obviously, if you're not setting up a company, if you're just moving for a job or something like that, then all of this is much more straightforward. Your company will deal with your work visa for you and things like this, and you just sort of go. Not much more to consider there. But assuming you're setting up a company and that is how you're getting residence, then this is the process. First of all, this entire setup will cost around 21,000 dirhams if you're doing this yourself. Plus, there's going to be around a 10,000 dirham service fee if you use our services. That essentially saves you with the hundreds of hours of research and everything like that they would have to do otherwise, which as an entrepreneur, if you're making even a little bit of money, that's most likely worth it for you. But just to be aware, that is the rough cost just for this setup process to get your company and your visa. Your first step will be to decide what kind of company you need. So in the UAE, we have essentially two types of companies. You have mainland companies and you have free zone companies. Roughly speaking, again, oversimplifying For the details, just book a call with us. If you're running an online business where you're mainly selling outside of the UAE, you would set up a free zone company. If you run a business within the country, like you actually do business with actual UAE companies or UAE people, then you would set up a mainland company. Then if you're going with a free zone company, you need to choose your free zone. And the thing here to understand, don't cheap out. Don't go with the cheapest free zone you can find. It's going to cause you a problem down the line, and you're going to thank me later if you just pay a bit more. One of the higher quality free zones. These are the kinds of free zones that we work with exclusively, because we've had so many problems with like people opening companies in some Sharjah free zone and then not being able to get banking or something like that, or it taking like 4 months to get your trade license or something like that. It doesn't cost that much more, so just don't cheap out in your free zone. In terms of the documents you need for this process, and by the way, this first step of the process can be done entirely outside of the UAE, so most likely you'll still be in the UK when you're doing this. You're just going to need your passport scan. You're going to fill out a very simple form. You just fill out a bit of basic information. You're going to need to choose the business activities for your business, so what kind of business you do, and then you're going to officially apply for, or we will apply for, your trade license for your business. And this will take approximately between 2 days to 1 week to process, and now you officially have a business in the UAE. After that, the next step is to hire yourself with this company as the director or manager and apply for what's called an entry permit, which is a permit that will allow you to enter the UAE to complete the rest of the process for you to personally become a UAE resident. And this gets us to the next step, which is your UAE arrival and visa process. So initially, after you have set up your company and got your trade license, you will now enter the UAE with the e-visa that you have issued for yourself via your company. This is a specific visa that allows you to do a few things, meaning to do your biometrics, to do your medical test, as well as apply for your official residence visa and Emirates ID, which is the official ID card in the UAE. And this is something you need to do while inside of the country. You need to enter the UAE at this point. I recommend getting an Airbnb or a hotel for at least 2 weeks. While here, first of all, for you to check out the place, you can check out the areas, and to complete all of these formalities. I would highly recommend going with a VIP processing for your Emirates ID and for your medical test, because it's just going to save you so much time, and it's actually going to be cheaper down the line because you're going to have to spend less time in an expensive hotel or an Airbnb while you're doing all of this. I learned this the hard way, by the way. And if you work with us, VIP processing is already included in the price that you're paying, so no extra cost to you. We have an employee that will pick you up, take you to these appointments, meet you there, essentially do all of this for you, walk you through the process. Or if you're doing it yourself, you can just look at medical centers online and things like this to complete all of these steps. So to recap, the steps are biometrics, medical test, as well as your Emirates ID application. By the way, an important thing to understand is that while your Emirates ID / residence visa are being processed, you need to stay in the country. You cannot actually leave the country while this process is ongoing. Another thing that I learned the hard way. Now you're going to wait for your Emirates ID to be delivered to you, and now officially you are a UAE resident, which means that you can leave the country freely. You can stay in the country straight away if you want to. What I did personally when I moved is that I actually left UAE again at this point to like finish up some stuff in the UK, pick up my stuff, and then I went back after around 2 weeks to fully officially move there. And this gets us to the next step, which is actually settling into your new life in the UAE. So you're gonna need to deal with practicalities like getting your first apartment, your bank accounts, things like this. In terms of housing, you wanna think about, are you gonna stay in the UAE for the entire year, or are you gonna use it as sort of a winter / a short-term base, as a lot of people are doing? If you're staying there for the entire year, you're gonna look at platforms like Property Finder or Bayut to find your apartment. You're gonna get your rental contract, set up your utilities, things like that. I covered this entire process of renting an apartment in the UAE in a separate video, which I will leave down below in the description. By the way, there's many steps there that I didn't consider before, many hidden fees, so make sure to watch that video. However, if you're staying short term, so let's say you only wanna stay in the UAE for the winter months, so from around November to May or something like that, because the summers are so hot, then I highly recommend you rent via a platform called Blue Ground. This is mostly where I've been getting my apartments from, because I actually ran the numbers, and even though it seems more expensive on the surface when you just look at the rate they give you on the website, in the end it's actually cheaper for you to rent from Blue Ground than with a regular tenancy contract if you're not staying in the place for the entire year. Because when you rent with a normal tenancy contract, there's many hidden fees that you will not know about until you go through the process. Again, I will make a full video on this process, reviewing Blue Ground, how it works, but just TLDR, you're staying for less than 1 year, I recommend it. And by the way, if you're looking to use Blue Ground, then don't forget to do it via my form down below in the description, because if you do that at absolutely no extra cost to you, you're gonna get $250 off your rental. So you might as well do that if you're going to use Blue Ground. And the other benefit of using Blue Ground to rent your first apartment is that you're not going to need to have a UAE bank account to do this. You can just pay with your credit card or with your foreign bank account, whereas for a normal rental, you're going to need to have a checkbook and all this, which brings us to the next step, which is setting up your bank account. And depending on whether you get lucky or not, this might be a very stressful process, or it might be a very easy process. If you work with us, we will get you a bank account directly in 1 day in the best bank, in my opinion, in the UAE, which is Emirates MBD, because we have contacts at these banks and we can sort of streamline this process for you. The other bank account I recommend you open immediately is WEO Personal. This is like the digital bank of the UAE. With these 2 bank accounts, you are very well set up. And then to open credit cards, usually the way it works here is, especially if you're self-employed, you're going to need to put up a fixed deposit, and based on that fixed deposit, you're going to get a credit limit for your credit card if you don't have a salary with a big company, especially if you don't have any credit history here. So you can actually get any credit card you want as soon as you come here, as long as you're willing to put up that deposit. And I covered credit cards, banking, everything like that, again, in a separate video, which you can find on the channel. And then there's going to be other things like setting up your SIM card. You're going to need to get a local driver's license, which you can most likely just swap your existing UK license to a UAE driver's license, and some other practicalities, which I've again covered in more detail on other videos on this channel. Sorry to make so many plugs, but I don't want this video to be like 2 hours long. And with that said, you're almost done with setting up your life in the UAE. And your last step is to make sure you understand your annual sort of compliance and reporting requirements for your new UAE company. Now, if you're a small business, and a small business is defined as a business that makes less than 300 million dirhams, so the local currency, in a year in revenue, so not profit, revenue. If you're below that threshold, you're exempt from the 9% corporate tax that the UAE introduced last year. However, even if you're exempt from having to pay the corporate tax, you're still going to have to report your accounts every single year. So you're going to need to do accounting, you're going to need to have proper accounts, things like this. For this, I use Zoho Books. That's the software that I use because it works directly with WEO Business, which is the business bank account that I recommend you open up for your business. And for accountants, obviously upon this, we can hook you up, or you're going to do your own research online. And also, even if you don't actually have to pay the 9% corporate tax, which most entrepreneurs don't have to do, at least until 2027, you still have to register for corporate tax. So you're going to go to the official UAE government portal. You're going to register your company. You're going to register for corporate tax. Again, if you work with us, we will just do it for you. But that is something that you do not want to forget, because the fine for not doing this on time is 10,000 dirhams. Depending on your revenue levels, you might also have to register for VAT. And again, if you're only selling outside of the UAE, you don't actually have to charge VAT, but you will still have to register for it. So if you remember those 3 things, corporate tax registration / paying corporate tax if you're above that 3 million dirham threshold, VAT registration / paying for VAT, and accounting, then you're set for your UAE company. Nothing else you have to worry about, unless you have a business that is in a specific category. Depending on your line of business, you might have some other compliance requirements or something like that, which again, we can help you with, but this is going to be a case-by-case thing that we would need to discuss. So that was a lot of information to cover. Again, many other videos on the channel on the UAE side as well as the UK side on all of these practicalities. I just didn't want to make this video like 5 hours so long or something like that. Again, if you want help, you can check out that free consultation. So completely free consultation that you can get with us, no strings attached. I will link some other relevant videos right here for you to watch on the process of moving to the UAE, because there's a lot of things that you want to understand. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.